Hey, what's up? What is happening? My name is Damala Asafa, and this is the Hear Me, Follow Him podcast. Again, it's Hear Me, the Follow Him podcast. And this was supposed to be an easy week right here. I was supposed to upload part 2 of the episode that I was working with Dr. Asif Razak called American Raised in Immigrant Blood. It's going to be a 4-part series. But I went there to look at what all we recorded for 2.5 good hours. Technical difficulties, the mic died. And since the microphone died, the phone didn't even kick in to pick up the backup audio. We had nothing. So, man, that kind of hurts because there were some jewels that Dr. Asif Razak was laying down. And now they're gone into the pitfalls of the technology abyss. But hopefully I can sit down with him again and maybe recapture some of that magic and bring that to y'all. But, I'm going to give you guys part 2 of American Raised Immigrant Blood, just from my perspective. Because my parents were in their high 20s when they moved to the United States. And so here I was at the age of 8, here in a new land. Everything was cool. I was with my mother and father finally after living in Nigeria for a while. But to navigate how it was to be a, quote, American, it was just different. Like, first I saw people who looked just like me, right? They were blacks, except they were called African Americans. And I'm like, cool, I guess I'm an African. The African Americans were brothers. But strangely enough, it was quickly, they let me know that I was different, that you were an African and we are black. And like, that used to always shock me. Like, what in the world? I thought I would come over here and like, we would just be instant brothers. But our histories are different. You know what I mean? And the more that I started to learn about American history as the years went by, the more that my jaw literally dropped. Because that's one thing as an immigrant, right? When you're raised by an immigrant, but you're an American kid, your parents don't necessarily want to learn American history. They might for taking a test later on, but they grew up with a different history and a different skill set, a different everything. And that's what they told us. Independence Day for me was October 1st, 1960. All of a sudden, I'm learning about July 4th. I'm learning about 1776, the George Washingtons. But what blew my mind was when I read about slavery. In Nigeria, all we were black and all we were free. Now, I'm not going to say like the government is all perfect and no corruptions. Everyone has the things that they're dealing with. But slavery, to not be free, it made me start looking at the African Americans like, okay, I see. That's why you guys act the way you act sometimes with the chip on your shoulder. But I wasn't African American. I was African. And so to my Caucasian colleagues that I met, they were always more curious. They just always had questions. So what's that like? And you always have that Yahoo that always has to ask the question, did you live with lions? Did you live with cheetahs? And when I was like a young kid, like I used to always try to answer that in an intellectual way. Like, no, what do you think? Like, we're not going to hang around where the wild animals are that can take our lives. Like, actually, when humans come in, we knock down their habitat and we try to keep them away. They keep trying to come back to where they were originally dons, but we just don't go set up in the middle of lions with huts and tents. And yes, there are industrialized cities, but even some of my Caucasian friends were actually more accepting of Africans than blacks were. And it just always floored me. And then at home, you get no type of training or no type of insight about how it is to be an American. So I started actually picking up this stuff from listening to the radio. One of my earliest memories was when I was around 9.5 years old. I would listen to Atlanta Brave games to learn how to speak English better and just to learn a little bit more about American culture. Terry Pendleton, I think it's Fred McGriff, Chipper Jones. And like when I was listening to them, it was like early 90s, they were always winning. And I just couldn't wait to go home and listen to Braves games on the radio. I listened to Rick Dees and the Weekly Top 40. And that put me on to so much American game. It got to the point that I know every American raised immigrant person can say this. I started teaching my own parents about American culture. I started coming home just like, did you know this? Did you know that? I don't know if they wanted to hear it or not, but especially the history. Started getting down with the music. I listened to a lot of rock and roll actually when I was younger, because that just seemed like that's what America was. It wasn't until I met Dr. Dre that like that just switched everything. Like I listened to country, rock and roll, and I still kind of do to this day. But I remember Dr. Dre's album, and that's not suitable for work or however that goes. It's not suitable for anybody, you would really say, to have a good mind. But I listened to Dr. Dre. I learned a lot about America that way too. But you know, being raised by immigrants in a foreign land is not anything new. And this is where I always like to tie things back to the Bible, because this is the Hear Me, Follow Him podcast. Like, sure, I experienced growing up in a foreign land with parents who didn't know the rules of the roads or anything. They were just kind of telling me, go to school, keep your head down, and do what you have to do. But being an immigrant isn't new. As a matter of fact, America's like tagline with the Statue of Liberty is "Give me your tired and huddled masses." But I want to use that to tie in to a story in the Bible of immigrants and how it totally changed the direction of how things were going to go. There was 12 brothers, right? And I'm just going to skip ahead and kind of summarize this. There were 12 brothers, and one of the brothers was really kind of special. He would have dreams, and he would tell his other brothers about it. Like, yo, in my dreams, basically, I'm lording over top of you guys. I'm lording over top of even mom and dad. Like, I keep having these dreams where I'm the man and you guys are subservient to me. And none of the brothers or the dad like that. So one day, like, the little brother was out doing what came out. He was by himself, and he was going over to his other 11 brothers. And they saw him coming, and I was like, dang, there goes that little bro dreaming that he's going to boss dog us. Let's do something about it. And so they did. And so they was going to actually kill him, which is so freaking evil. But one of the brothers was like, bro, we don't want that blood on our hands. Why don't we just like throw him in a well or like do something with him just to get rid of him? And so they did. He was ended up sold into slavery, and he had to leave his land, and he ended up in Egypt. Like, time will go by, and a famine would hit the land where the 11 brothers are now with their dad. And that caused them to be immigrants. Like, their dad looked at them and was like, yo, we can't stay in this land, because if there's no food, the famine is going to kill us. We're going to lose all our animals, everything. Why don't you go to a different land, right? And go see whether you could find some food, because the famine is severe. And so the 11 brothers went to Egypt. But fast forward to skip a lot of the story, you need to check that out in the book of Genesis. I think it's around Genesis 44 all the way to Genesis 50. But this whole story is. But the brother who was sold and ended up in Egypt first will become second in command in Egypt. And the 11 brothers would come for food and would not recognize him, because it had been so many years since they had sold their brother. Long story short, the younger brother, who's not a leader in Egypt, ends up giving them food, says, I want you to bring my father back and stay here with me, because the famine is going to last an extended period of time. And so they did. And that family became immigrants, basically, in the land of Egypt. And the family that I'm talking about is Jacob and his 12 kids, also known as Israel and the 12 tribes. So Israel and the 12 tribes have now became immigrants in a foreign land in Egypt. They're going to follow God the way that they know that their father has shown them, but in this land in Egypt, they have rules. And one of the first things, and it's really one of their saving graces, and I don't have the scriptures open, I'm just using my memory to recant this to you guys. One of the saving graces, the Egyptians looked at shepherds as an abomination. So the Israelites that came, the 11 brothers and, their wives and all the kids and all that good stuff, I think when they came, there were about 70 in all, or I could have that wrong, but there were a very small number when they came. But during that time, they couldn't be in Egyptian cities. They were an abomination. So they were actually set apart in a different part of that land as immigrants in a town called Goshen. Because that's the only way that's the only place that those immigrants could stay. They too were a foreign people in a foreign land. All that stuff has even happened here. If you look at the Chinese or the Asian population and Japanese population, even just Asian, like I said, in San Francisco area, it's because in World War II, we had kind of our own internment camps where if you were an immigrant from those countries, we shoved you in a place where we can watch you and keep an eye on you. So in biblical times, man, them being immigrants to the land of Egypt not only set up how the population of Israel would grow from that 70 or for that low number to over 1 million before they're going to go to Exodus, but it is an immigrant story, and they were different, and they were an abomination, and they were to live in a separate land. They couldn't have they couldn't have contact in certain ways with the Egyptians in the land that they were immigrants to. So it's never changes that in a way we're all kind of immigrants, and we treat people a little bit differently. If I gotta capture that thought in a way, because I'm saying it wrong. What I'm trying to say is, in this life, in a way, aren't we all immigrants? Until we find people who are just like us, and we click together, make a community, and then we try to treat other people like immigrants. It is so freaking weird. Here's an example just came into my head. If you go to any big major city, you'll see a Chinatown. That's a lot of Chinese people who have grouped together, and they literally use their own language. They have their own newspaper, sometimes their own news, and all the signage is in Chinese. If you come in, even in America, you're allowed there to go shop, eat, do whatever what you want, but at times they're going to treat you like an immigrant. If they can make certain rules that you'll have to follow, they certainly will. But in America, we have our little freedoms, but everywhere else in the world, like right now, believe it or not, in China, there's actually internment camps, just like there were for Jews in World War II. There is in China as we speak right now. Think over 1 million or 2 million people, because they are different. They are immigrants. And China has stricter laws, right? And so they just do what they do, but they're treated the way they are because they are immigrant. It can be difficult. I had some difficulties myself. And I'm sure it was very difficult for Israel himself in Egypt as they were living that way. And in the continual of the story, they actually start being oppressed when the Egyptians notice that these immigrants are blowing up in numbers. They're having too many kids. They're strong. They're vibrant. God is with them. And the people cannot stand these immigrants anymore. The same immigrant that when he came, when the brother that they sold and that God was with him became second in command in Egypt, is because God was with them and he was able to help them stock up food and get ready for the famine. But those same immigrants are now a nuisance. Look at our borders right now as they're being ran over. Like these are tired and huddled masses. But we have rules and laws too. So it's just such a catch-22 when you start thinking about immigrants and how they're treated. But they're running over the border right now in Mexico as we speak, right? They're coming over here illegally. And we're going to have some set laws and some different rules. And believe it or not, they're going to be treated different because they're immigrants. You can say illegal immigrant, illegal alien, but whatever. When you're different, you're treated like an immigrant. But let me tell you this, God is the God of all. And there are no countries and nations with him. We're just a people. And when we're a people that are seeking after him with one heart, you'll see that there'll be a multitude of what we call nations and representations and people groups who are yearning and going after God. And even the scriptures kind of read like that. Like there's just a little bit of everybody from everywhere. So what I would say is we need to start showing love to people, especially if you think that they're an immigrant, right? Show love to them if they're different, because that is your brother and sister. This world will have us divided on skin, ethnicity, creed, all this age, all the stuff it says in the applications, and just a million ways it can divide. But God actually unites and gets us not to see that, but to treat the immigrant or the foreigner like we would treat ourselves. There's lots of old rules or laws in Deuteronomy that says what you're supposed to do for the sojourner amongst you or the foreigner amongst you. And they are to be loved like you are loving yourself. But I think I was rambling a little bit there, but my whole point and the whole thing is that it's difficult. It's difficult being an immigrant in a foreign land. And I know I experienced that firsthand. But as people as as people of God, let's keep our eyes open to the plight and the hurt and the pains that the immigrant go through. So when they come to our country or you go to their country as a Christian, we can receive them and show them the love that I know God will show them, because he looks at them not as immigrants, but as his people. Hey, thank you for sticking. If you listen to the whole thing, appreciate you. Thank you. Hit the subscribe button. As my little girls like to say, smash the like button. Let me know that you enjoy this content. I'm going to preview what I'm going to bring the next time. I'm going to come with a story about the judicial system. And it's really decent. A story about the judicial system, and show how God really has his hands in almost everything as we go through that. This is the Hear Me, Follow Him podcast. Thank you very much. God bless.